Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us on the inaugural wrap of the 2014-15 season. Hopefully, we won't need to run like some horses, and we can get off from the fighting fit with like David Piper's at the weekend. Obviously, Paddy Power weekend has just gone, so we're going to focus on them two races. Main one being the Paddy Power, which is run on the Saturday, and won by Kate de Belair, who probably most certainly the highlight for Sam Twiston Davies of his partnership so far with Paul Nicholls. Dave, what did you think of the performance, the race, and those in behind?
I thought as a race, I thought it was I think it's quite a solid piece of form. I know myself and Rory we talked about the race afterwards. We said it was quite a sort of strange race because it seemed to go quite quick early, slowed it down in the middle, and then there were plenty of chances for sort of three out in the last. Really, there was no ending with this gun, which you don't normally get. But as a piece of form, it's going to be very solid, isn't it? The right horses were all there at the end, right back to sort of seventh place, really. Ted de Burley, yeah, I mean, he's been called a name or two, but there was nothing wrong with his position. I thought it was a really good ride, actually, from Sam Twiston, who gets it right. When he gets it right, I should say, looks very, very good. And I thought he got it absolutely spot on here. He had a target to aim at with John Spirit. Um, Felt a little bit sorry for John Spirit because he had to commit when he did, but all he's done is just giving Kate de Burley a bit of a target to aim at. But I mean that's what you've got to say about Kate de Burley now is his Cheltenham record is starting to look pretty good. Second and third at two festivals and the winner of a Paddy Power from 3 runs. So we'd expect to see him back pumping at the festival. What what it would be remains to be seen. But I thought it was a very solid piece of form. Wise was the one that I know both myself and Roy were quite keen on and have been for a while. Only got a bit of stick for the ride, but I don't think there's anything wrong with the ride. Look back at the race. Look at his positioning throughout the race. The two horses he's alongside for most of the race are Kate de Burley and John Spirit, and no one's saying either of them was a poor ride. So I just think he's got a little bit out pace actually at crucial moments. He's only a length behind Kate de Burley at the last as well. Kate de Burley just got a better turn of foot. So I think it's solid piece of form for me. That there'll be plenty of winners to come out of the race, and wise, yeah, perhaps there's another day for him, perhaps over further. Maybe as a Hennessy horse. I don't know.
Well, when I was looking back at the replay early today, I think four of the first five on by in present view, when they're leaving the back straight, they're all five or six wide and just held up out the back. I know as the week progressed, the racing progressed, the ground obviously deteriorated. Think there was any bias or any benefit of certainly being 3 or 4 wide throughout?
I'd say more so as a rule on the hurdles course. There's no doubt that when you get to the very outside of the track at Cheltenham, whatever the ground is, to be honest, you do find faster ground. The grass is a little bit barer. The water doesn't get into the ground so much because it drains down from the very outside. But that's true particularly in the hurdles course. The chase course obviously is in the middle, but the outside of the track gets less churned up. So by the time they came to the Paddy Power in the middle of Saturday, we've had a number of chases already where they fight up the inside of the course, and it was beneficial to be on slightly higher ground. I don't think it mattered to a large degree where you were in terms of your field position, because the key to the ability to finish close up at the end of this race was handling the ground to some degree, but also tactical speed, because they didn't set off at a crawl, but they did slow things down considerably in the middle part of the race, and that made it a little bit unsatisfactory for me. I don't think Cat de Burley is the best horse in the race, even at the weights. I know he's not had that much racing, and the obvious thing to say is, only 4 chase starts. He's clearly progressing well now. I think he took advantage of a good opportunity here and was doing a very good ride by Sam Twiston Davies, who rides the chase course at Cheltenham very well. I'm not sure he rides the hurdles track anywhere near as well. It's a rather strange one. But he gave this a cracking ride. He gave Sam Winner an exceptional ride on the same day. I thought John Spirit is the horse we should be talking about. It was a monstrous performance from him to finish second, giving so much race away to the winner. When he didn't get the run of the race, he he wants to creep into things around the outside here, but half the field were trying to do the same thing. He got there a little bit too soon. He then idled in front and got caught by Cad de Burle. I thought he rallied when he was caught. I thought he looked by far the best horse in the contest for most of it. And I think he's a credible challenger for the Ryanair on the back of that. He'd need to improve again in theory, but clearly he looked a weak horse as a novice chaser. Clearly talented, but it took him a while to grow up. And last year he still seemed to make things very much in his favour. I thought the ground would be against him at the weekend. So close to heavy is not what he wants from what we've seen in the past. Not because he doesn't get through it, but it's affected his jumping in the past. And he didn't quite have the robustness, the strength to jump out of the ground and stay on as strongly as he has. Whereas this year he looks a stronger horse, he looks a more complete horse, and I think he's taken a big step forward here. So I think there's going to be another half-stone improvement in him between now and the spring. I don't see him running that much in the meantime. I know his owner goes to New Zealand after this meeting and stays there until March, so he'd be delighted to see the horse put away and brought back fresh for the Ryanair. We know he goes well fresh. He's won competitive chases on his first start in the last 2 seasons, so there's no reason to slog around a winter ground with him. He's the one to take out of the race. Although, again, I'm going to say nice things about Bywise. I thought he was the horse least suited by the way the race was run and the way he was ridden as well. He suggested the way he finished that he will stay 3 miles and beyond, and I know that Evan Williams has him in the Hennessy and quite fancies his chances there. His jumping was okay here, although there was very little excuse for poor jumping in the race given that they were going at a fairly pedestrian pace. So it's it put less emphasis than normal on jumping. With Cheltenham, it's not so much that the fences are big and stiff, it's more that when you race there, you're racing with fairly big and stiff fences, but particularly at a fast pace, which catches a lot of horses out. But we didn't see that in the Paddy Park. So Bywise wasn't really tested in that department. He made one mistake. As a rule, his jumping was safe, but he was one of the first off the bridle to get badly tapped for toe before they reached the top of the hill. And he was in a terrible position from there, but he finished faster than anything in the race. And he still has a big handicap in him from his current mark.
Would he be one for if he comes back, if he misses the Hennessy, comes back in December? Would that be one in the December Gold Cup?
It's a stiffer test of stamina, the December Gold Cup. It's a slightly longer trip, 2 mile 5 as opposed to 2 mile 4.5. And it tends to be more attritional. So that would suit him, but I would imagine he'd go for the Hennessy with him. Go for this.
Paul, one for me which I was actually impressed by the way he jumped was actually Oscar Whiskey in the Paddy Power. I know he's had a wind up in the off season. Last season he was jumping out to his right, very erratic. I thought he was very safe and steady in the Paddy Powers. Would he be one to take out going forward, or is it pretty much Bywise loving?
No, not necessarily on the Bywise camp. I agree with what Rory said about John Spirit. There's a lot to like, and you've got to feel sorry for their connections. To be honest, he come to win his race, he did little wrong, and he was mugged late on basically. Himself and Oscar Whiskey deserve credit with carrying the big weight. I know Oscar Whiskey was pretty much he only just about got him ready, so I'd expect him to come on. I was saying to Dave in the parade ring beforehand, I'd rather like you. Judged on his novice form, he wasn't one I would have been screaming out as a Paddy Power contender. Maybe the fact that, like Rory said, the pace wasn't as strong as usual, maybe that helped Oscar Whiskey in terms of not getting run off his feet over fence, which I thought might have happened in that race. But I'd expect him to come on, so I'd expect him to probably be a player in the December Gold Cup. Again, John Spirit, he went through the race like the class act and did little wrong. And a couple more I have marked down that haven't been mentioned so far. Obviously, Present View was sent off favourite. I think he might have done a tad bit too much early on. Maybe he wasn't so much keen, but a big prodigious leap at the first took him to the front, and he probably could have done with sitting in just in behind third or fourth maybe. And again, the ground was probably softer than ideal for him. I was speaking to Jamie on Saturday night, and I suggested maybe the old Racing Post Chase would be the ideal target for him, but I know he's already got a man to top him at Aintree, which probably would be a good race given his prominent racing style and the way he jumped from fence to fence on Saturday. Decent ground at Aintree, probably he certainly wants to put in your notebook for then. And further back, the Munster National winner, Sham Palace of Charles Burns, who carried the first JP colours. I thought he travelled well into the race, and he was there, bang there at the last. And the fact he won the Munster National would suggest, obviously, he gets home, so you wouldn't think it was the trip that he didn't get up the hill. But I think that Wise genuinely does want good ground. And again, he's probably one to bear in mind. You might not see him for a while, but we wouldn't be surprised if he turned up in the 3 mile handicap at the festival and give a running.
Paul, stay with you for the Greatwood. I know, obviously, in the lead up to the pardon.
The painful result for him.
I know in the lead up to, obviously, to the week that you and your Nicky Henderson handicap hurdles, we had the likes of Volnadete at Huntingdon, sign of victory, which we'll touch on later, and obviously Vaneteur was the rage coming into the race. What do you think of his performance in the race as a whole?
Well, as you know, I backed him several weeks ago before the weights came. As soon as the entries were announced, I backed him. I thought 147 was a fair mark, and everything seemed to be going to plan. I was concerned about the ground for him. His defeat last year on Boxing Day. I know people put that down to the ground, but having watched it back, he probably would have won that race only for a mistake at the last. And he did improve. He flourished through the spring in the lead up to the festival, which was why he was rerouted from Aintree. So I was prepared to give him another chance on the ground anyway. And he travelled for the majority of the race like the best horse in the race. The foot of the hill looked like all was going to plan, and I actually thought there was visions of another sign of a victory performance coming on. He did start to waver as they turned into the straight, and I think he did blow up before the second last. People could say it was the fact that he was racing alone on the inside of the track didn't necessarily help him, but he saved yardage going that way and turning in. I think he did. He definitely looked like he sort of blew up, and then he ran on again. He looked like he was going to flounder to me, and then after the last he picked up well, to be fair, and he was beaten by a race fit horse from a stable who's in absolute red hot form at the weekend, which we'll touch on in a minute. He was given an astute ride from the front by Richard Johnson. No real complaints really. I think when they meet again later in the season, if they meet again, I'm sure Vaneteur will turn the table on him, but no real complaints on the day, to be honest.
Well, I think there's a fair few. The first three, I think, they were a class above. I think there's a few in behind, which the likes of Pine Creek might have some for the lab book or something later in the season. But as a race as a whole, were you impressed by it, or want to follow through with the season?
No, not particularly. I thought the race was over after 100 yards, as David will tell you. Every now and again you get a race that you have no idea about beforehand, but seconds after it starts you can see what's going to happen in it. And they stood still for 5 or 10 seconds as the tapes went up, and then Richard Johnson was able to set a slow pace on Garde la Victoire and get the coveted outside rail. And for me, I wouldn't say, it's a bit harsh to say the race was over at that stage. I thought he was in a fantastic position. Given he's a horse of high quality, I thought it was going to be very difficult to stop him from there. There's not a huge amount behind in the field that I'd be interested in for the future. Although I thought the likes of Catgary and Baltimore Rock will do better somewhere down the line. They were well beaten in the end. I agree with Paul to a degree that the fact that Vaneteur went round right on the inside might have been less of a disadvantage than it looked. I think the one place you don't want to be when everyone was trying to get on a single strip of ground right underneath that outside rail, if you were stuck in the middle of the track, you were on the worst of the ground. And I think the rail wouldn't have been any worse, and by definition you're saving ground going there. Although I find it almost bizarre that Barry Geraghty, who would be the first jockey normally to grab the outside rail, particularly coming into the straight, getting on the stands rail in the straight at Cheltenham is a big positive, even when you don't want to be there through most of the race. And he didn't do it once this weekend. He was round the inside every single race. And I thought that was very unusual for a jockey as clued up as he is. And I thought if I was looking for horses to take from this meeting, I would almost just list the Nicky Henderson horses that ran here and take them forward. I don't think we saw most of them to best effect. And Vaneteur is the one to take out of the race for the future. He is the image of a top-class hurdler. He was by far the paddock pick, although, as Paul said, slight concern that he wasn't hard fit for this, but he stands out a mile in terms of his looks, his physique. He was a little bit nappy going out onto the course, which is something you've got to keep an eye on. But he was better than the better result, and he filled your eye both beforehand and during the race as well. So he's undoubtedly the horse to take forward. I would disagree that Control Warrior fits in the category of, the front three were different class. He's getting into this off a mark of 10 stone. He doesn't strike me as... he's at the right end of the handicap to be placed to advantage. I'm sure Willie Mullins will. But he doesn't strike me as anything special as a hurdler, and it's just a case of, he's improved on the flat of late, but I don't think he hit the same sort of heights over hurdles as he has on the flat, and he's not particularly prepossessing himself. So Condor Warrior, he's one for the short term, not the long term. Blue Heron did well in fourth, and will be a chaser in time. Big, strong horse, capable of handling conditions. Not placed brilliantly here in terms of how close he was to the pace or how close he was to the outside rail. So he's one you would mark up in behind, and he's definitely got a future. I think they want to get him more fences sooner rather than later, to be perfectly honest. But he should do well this winter.
Dave, so guess same thoughts to you as in relation to Richard Johnson bagging the Golden Highway?
Yeah, I don't know what Roy's talking about. He never said a word to me after the start. He's back.
I've got independent verification as well,
Yeah.
Want to bet him?
He just said this, and I think Garlovic's probably going to win this. I'll fight the case a bit more for Blue Heron, because he was one I put up at the beginning of this season that I thought would be a really interesting contender this year. That's only his fourth hurdle start, and I thought he did really well. I had a word with Dan Skelton afterwards, and he said we were absolutely delighted. Everything he's passed from the home turn, he was giving weight to. And you can argue a case that he's improved again here, because don't forget he's already come up against Gardner Victoire once in April here, and albeit over half a mile further, but they were off level weights that day, and Gardner Victoire beat him 10.5. Here he was giving Gardner Victoire £2, and he's got beat 7 lengths. So you can argue a case that he's still improving. His victory over Parlour Games the time before was given a bit of a boost on the Friday with that one winning. And he comes back for the Christmas hurdle. I think he'd be quite interesting in the Christmas hurdle. Not short of speed by any means, and he will next season be a really nice chaser to follow. But Blue Heron did well for me. And I agree with you about Pine Creek as well, Dan. I thought he was another one that was quite interesting before the race. They were trying, because he'd won first time up last year, I thought they were trying to land a decent pot with him again. Same thing here, but I think he'll actually come on for the run. And a decent handicap hurdle is still within his mark, I think.
You mentioned off air just before we came on about Three Kingdoms today at Leicester. Did you get the impression that the majority of the Ferguson horses in the weekend were a lot more forward than others?
No, they were I thought they were a bit of a mixed bag actually. Some up a bit more forward than others. I mean, I know I mentioned Three Kingdoms today. For those that weren't there, I was at Leicester today. Three Kingdoms was absolutely hard fit today. Couldn't have got him much better than that, and I would imagine they'll probably be putting him away fairly. It'll want decentish ground, I think, Three Kingdoms, and I would imagine he'll be back in the spring at some point for something. But he looked quite impressive today in the paddock. He was definitely the fittest horse. I thought they'd been a mixed bag actually. The Ferguson horses, Parlour Game certainly looked fit, but there were others that we saw in the bumpers that I thought could have looked a bit better than they did. So that they weren't all 100% by any means. No.
Obviously, the weekend as a whole was a success for the Hobbs and Johnson team, with Hobbs 6 winners and Johnson 7. We'll go to you, Rory. Balthazar King, is he competing with Nakara Bo for favourite horse, or has he still got somewhere to go?
No, he's always been a bit of a favourite of mine, Balthazar King. Obviously, Nakara Bo has a statue in my garden, but he's a star, Balthazar King. I liked him enormously as a novice. He was a lovely jumper for fence then, and I remember in my time on radio days saying he's the type of horse to win a big handicap chase in the spring against older horses, because his attitude was so good and his jumping technique was terrific. And unfortunately, every time I fancied him, he ran a stinker in the Bet365 World Cup, for example. But he ended up winning the cross country the following season, and he's been nigh on unstoppable at Cheltenham. As 8 wins he's gained now, and only half of those in cross country races. So he's got a terrific record. He's the winning most horse at Cheltenham in the last 50 odd years. The only horse in the history of the course with more wins than him is the 1951 Gold Cup winner Silver Flame, who was either 9 or 10, depending who you listen to. I think the official line on Friday was that he's got 9 wins, so one more from Balthazar King will get him that, will match those achievements. In my opinion, it's 10, although I'm missing 1 or 2 form books, so it's not easy to dig out. He's a funny one because everything was against him in the cross country. It wasn't a terribly weak race, despite the smallish field. The ground isn't his thing at all. He wants genuinely good or quicker ground, to be honest. He looked all to see it. He made a couple of bad mistakes, but he showed real guts and resolution to win that. And one of the most amazing things about it is after he won that first cross country chase at the festival a few seasons ago, he came back with a burst valve in his heart. The kind of thing that you'd expect to see him drop dead in the winners' enclosure afterwards. They diagnosed that he wasn't right afterwards. He was very quiet, and they found out that he'd had this injury. I would have thought it would have led to his retirement, but he's been remarkable since. So fair play to him, and fair play to Philip Hobbs and Richard Johnson. Philip Hobbs played it down to a large degree afterwards. He just said, sometimes it's like this. There are 4 scenarios, he said. Your horses are running badly, and the vets are able to tell you that they've got a virus or some sort of problem that's stopping them running badly. They're running badly for no apparent reason. There's nothing really wrong with them, and they're just below par. They're running quite well, and you're getting your share of winners, or as they are at the moment, you just can't lose with them. And there's not a huge difference between running quite well and getting a few winners and winning everything before them. So you've got to enjoy it while you can. And of course, he knows that he'll be coming down to earth with a bump at some stage. And of course, these horses who are winning races and handicaps at the moment, whenever they're on top of the world, they're going to struggle at the same time as a handicapper takes effect. So don't be surprised if Philip Hobbs has a dreadful December or a dreadful January, because that's the way the game goes. But at the moment, he's enjoying the success while he can.
Dave, obviously, talking point, I think it was on the Friday, was the novice chase and the missing of all the fences. Other than the lack of the fences, was there much in the performance of Champagne West to get you excited, and also the other novice chases of the weekend, King's Palace and the likes?
Champagne West was probably actually the one out of the Hobbs winners this weekend that I enjoyed the most. We're calling the winner a long way out. I thought we'll call the 1-2 a long way out, actually, Champagne West and Colour Squadron. And he's probably not going to get the credit he deserves for that, because people will crap Colour Squadron again. But Colour Squadron's a good horse on his day, and there were no mug horses that were behind him. Irvin and Del Arca are good performers on the day. But the way that he jumped the fences that they did jump was a pleasure to watch. And the way that he's travelled throughout the race, he's probably always going to need a bit of cut in the ground, but there's plenty more to be done with him, that's for sure. King's Palace. King's Palace was all the rage, wasn't he? Everybody you spoke to was telling you how well King's Palace had scored beforehand, and you have to say he was impressive. We did have reservations beforehand about him. Possibly, the tongue time might have been a slight negative that he was wearing for the first time, but he was very, very impressive. Remains to be seen for me. I want to see him do it again. I'm a bit of a sceptic. I'd like to see him come on from that rather than regress. But yes, it was a good performance.
Paul, the novice hurdles. I think the novice hurdle on Sunday was won by Nicky Anderson. I think Mark Hayes that Victor Duroc was a very fluent jumper, even out those sticky ground. So no doubt got eyes on fences going down the line. Is there any other performances at Cheltenham weekend which caught your eye?
Not so much in the novice hurdle division. I think certainly Vita de Rock looks an embryonic chaser, as does Emerging Talent, who finished second. I think they've got their futures will be more. You see them coming to the fore next year, probably over fences. Again, I'd reiterate what Dave said. Looking back at the novice chases, Champagne West was certainly one of the highlights of the weekend for me. And again, I thought Johnson gave him a cracking ride. To be honest, I think he took it up just at the right time. Took the race by the scruff of the neck. And people saying he definitely wants further. I think he'd be all right while the ground soft staying at 2.5 at the moment, because he certainly wasn't look devoid of pace there, and the fact that they did miss 6 fences out would have made it a bit more of a speed test than the race should have been. And if you actually look back at the Albert Bartlett last year, he travelled that well. He tanked into the race really. So I think he's all right to 2.5 for now, and he was certainly one of the highlights. Again on Saturday, touching on what Rory said about the Henderson horse, I thought Hargam travelled really well in the juvenile hurdle. I think he's an obvious horse for anyone to take out to the meeting. Golden Doyen was obviously match fit, the winner, and you've got to give him credit for his resolution, because I think he looked beat on 2 or 3 occasions during the race, but came back for more. But I think Hargam's probably the one to take out of that going forward. And just as an event as a whole on Saturday, I thought the Mares Bumper was probably the stronger Mares Bumper as I can remember for a while. I think it was probably at least up, if not better than the Sandown and Aintree Bumpers from the spring. Dave and I were looking at them in the paddock, and as he said with the Paddy Power Gold Cup, I certainly think the first 6 were the right horses. They were the ones we noted down as being the good lookers. Bit of a puzzle's massive. I think she's going to have no problem jumping over an obstacle. She got her conditions, but to win the way she did, given the field £4 was a fine performance. Montana Bell and Miss Estella, both nice types in the same Brookhouse colours. Montana Bell looks like she's got plenty of size about her, and Miss Estella was the one that probably stood out as much as anything, but I'll let Dave speak about her because he said he'd seen her at the April meeting last year and she did look similar. In 4th, Briery Queen, he was a 66 to 1 outsider for Noel Williams, but certainly didn't look any fluke about the way she went through the race. She was another looker in the parade ring, as was Dusky Legend, who ran on late. She was a bit green during the race. There's certainly races to be won with all of them once they go into Mares Novice hurdles, as long as they can avoid Tara Point.
Dave, Mr. Stoller, and anything else from the weekend at Paddy Power?
Yeah, Mr. Stella looked outstanding in the paddock. Ran a little bit flat in the race. Gavin took the wide route, which was the right route to take, but just found herself off the bridle too often. She stayed on well enough. She's not lost any further ground really once they've turned in, so perhaps a bit further is going to suit her. But she looked as well as anything in the paddock, and she's certainly better than that. Anything else over the weekend? I'm going to put a mention in for a horse that all the last season didn't look. I never thought it looked that well actually, but first run for Tom George. Saint R travelled so well in the Stayers Chase. First time tongue tie for him, and he looked so well in the paddock that you've got to think back on a flat track there's going to be a big handicap backing in again off that mark. He's travelled every bit as well as the front two. He's just not quite got up the hill as well as them. But I thought he looked outstanding in the paddock. Really looked well in his coat, and he'll come off that run. And he's definitely one for my notebook. The old boy will. I say old boy. I think he's only about 7 still. 7 or 8. He'll be winning a decent handicap chase before much longer, definitely.
Rory, anything else from the Paddy Power weekend?
Yeah, plenty of horses who didn't seem to be ready for it. As I said, the Nicky Henderson horses, as a rule, are worth looking at. We've mentioned a couple of these specifically. One who didn't get a mention, one he was definitely not ready for the race he ran in, is a horse called Birch Hill in the bumper yesterday. He looked big and green and unfit, and also went right round the inside. And I thought he ran better than the bear result in finishing 5th there. He'll be a much, much better horse next time out. And the Druid's Nephew from Cheltenham is worth a mention as well. He's a horse I was a big fan of as a novice, and I went off him a bit last year. I wasn't sure how keen he was, but a move from Andy Tunnell to Neil Mulholland has perked him up. I thought 3.5 miles, or close to 3.5 miles in very soft ground would be too far for him. And I think he was ridden that way by Barry Garrity. He actually jumped well. I was concerned about that, but he jumped well. He travelled well, but he was too clean, and Barry was just always trying to hold on to something, so he was a bit left for the finish. And he ended up giving Sam Winner a bit too much rope. He looked like he might have won that with a slightly more aggressive ride. He will benefit from a drop back in trip, or a marginal drop back in trip at least. And he's another one who comes into play with a Hennessy. Because obviously his new mark will come into effect until after that. So with the Hennessy being an early closing race, so I put up mini Clydes for that race before the season started. And I still like him as a project, but I do think there's a slight question mark about his stamina at 3.25 miles. It's clearly not the issue with the Druid's nephew. And it would be interesting to see Mr. Mulholland get a bit of compensation for what happened at Wincanton.
Yeah, today on the Birchill, Garrett's actually turned around and said that the race is blocked, that he'll come on for it for body and mind. So obviously one.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point. He was unfit, and he was clearly that kind of the way that they're a little bit buzzy at times when they don't really know what's expected of them. So that's the kind of run you often see in horses at the Gaff tracks. He needs this experience. Let's just get him out there and do his thing. But in this case, it was Nicky Henderson setting a horse at Cheltenham in a similar sort of conditions. So it's a very tough race to run in. But he's a big, strong horse. He's going to make it a staying chaser in time. I guess that's true of pretty much all Ronnie Bartlett's horses. But definitely has a future. He'll improve for this next time out, and he'll do better 6 months, a year down the line as well.
Paul, will come to you for any other action away from Cheltenham. Obviously, I think Catherine Fry said it best when I got a message off her about Hurricane Fly when it won the 20th grade one. She just pretty much said, "What a fucking horse." I think that pretty much covers it in that context. I know there's been, I was impressed straight away from performance at Weatherby. I think you were impressed by another, and might be even this one. It was Top Gamble in the novice chase. And I thought he didn't put a foot wrong there for Richard Lee since he'd moved from David Pipe. Is there anything else over the weekend which took your eye?
I'd certainly agree with Top Gamble as a cracking around the jumping. I just noted down Punch's time yesterday. Obviously, Hurricane Fly was the obvious highlight. But a couple of other performances on the card. I thought Shanahan's turn jumped particularly well in the novice chase over 2 miles 6. He looks a nice type, and the bumper looks a smart one for the Mullins team. Bordini thought he'd done that really impressively.
Dave, weekend as a whole, or is it just all about the fly away from Cheltenham?
Well, obviously there was the little novice hurdle at Weatherby that I was paying a little bit to. Delighted to see One Track Mind win on his hurdling debut for Mr. Weller, Mr. Cutmore, and Warren Gretrix in the yard. Fantastic to see his progress. It was a carbon copy of watching his bumper there, but with 8 hurdles in the way. And I was pleased in a way that he made a mistake on the far side. He'd lost his footing a bit on the far side, made a bad mistake, but he was back on the bridle again within 100 yards, which is great to see. I know from speaking to Andy, he said that he hated, there was a patch of ground on the far side, it was a lot stickier on the far side, and he didn't go through it that well. So there's your sort of reason for him making the mistake that he did, but he'll learn from that, and it was wonderful to see him come away in the closing stages. I know there was a lot of talk afterwards that he already needs 2, 6 and 3 mile. He doesn't need 2, 6 and 3 mile. What he needs, he's just shown there that he's perfectly capable at 2.5 mile with cutting the ground. He's not short of speed when there's a bit of cut around. He has got a turn of foot as well as some stamina in the line. So brilliant to see, and let's hope he continues his progress.
Well, are you away from Cheltenham?
It's going back a little while now, but last Monday at Carlisle, shut the front door, winning the graduation chase there. He's a horse I think has been incorrectly pigeonholed because John Joe O'Neill's got Holywell as his main second season chaser. Or he's got 2 very good second season chasers in Holywell and Tacky and Destroy that people are talking of as Gold Cup horses. But I think Shut the Front Door could be every bit as good as that pair. And if he was just a handicap project, he wouldn't have been winning that decent graduation chase first time up. Would have given the handicap a little bit too much scope. But speaking to John Joe afterwards as well, he was remarkably open, and John Joe is normally extremely cagey about his horses, particularly as they tend to be handicappers, and he doesn't want to give anything away. But this horse is heading to the Lexus Leopardstown next. Bear in mind, that's also the route that Synchronised went in winning the Gold Cup. He took a lot of people by surprise as well. I think Shut the Front Door is capable of doing the same thing. I think he's a big player in the Lexus. And things didn't always go smoothly last season, and he's disappointed at Cheltenham a couple of times, but he's also run well there in the past. And there's a question among some people as to whether he would go left-handed, but as I said, I think he's run well enough at Cheltenham on occasion. He's also won a very good listed bumper at Newbury in his time to show that he's neither incapable of going that way right nor short of speed. Because he won an Irish national, he's now been again pigeonholed as an out-and-out slaying chaser, but again, we're back to synchronised. Exactly the same thing with him having won a Midlands national and a Welsh national before going on to win the Cheltenham Gold Cup, and this is a horse in similar mould who could surprise a few people.
Dave, to wrap up the podcast on the agenda put forward, obviously with it being the first one of the year, any performances which you've been impressed by so far? Has there been? Is there anything which made you stand up and take notice, or is it just all about to get going for yourself now?
Yeah, it's going to get going, isn't it? I mean, I've been to a few meetings now and seen a few horses in the flesh. Well, it stands out a bit, really. He's only won a couple of Mickey Mouse races, but I've seen Elmer Moose twice in the flesh at Huntingdon. My word, he's a big thing. He is. He's going to. It'd be interesting to see where they go with him. What John Ferguson's got in mind for Elmer Moose, because he's cruised through all of his races so far. And although they've both been on soft ground, he won his. I think he won his. I'm right in saying he won his Musselburgh bumper on good ground. He beat Racing Europe that day, who's not short of speed. I'm going to be very interested to see where John Ferguson goes with Elmer Moose this season. I think he's probably going to be off a decent handicap mark somewhere along the line, and there'll be something with him, I'm sure.
Paul, I know you jumping prospects have got off to a good start. What's been on your shortlist so far from the season?
An obvious one would be Sign of a Victory. We touched on it before. Hugely impressive at Ascot off 139. We're up to 150 now. The original plan was the Ladbroke, but he's been given an entry in the fighting fifth, so I guess they'll see how that cuts up. I haven't actually had a chance to look at the weekend entries yet, but I believe 4 Ian's off to Ascot. That could rule him out to go into Newcastle, so the owner might be tempted, depending on the ground, of course, but I think Newcastle would suit him. I don't think he's far off putting himself into the bracket towards the outsiders of the Champion Hurdle. On the novice front, I think the novice chase divisions look deep. In each division, we haven't seen so many 2 milers yet, but certainly 2.5 and going up to 3 miles. I think they're going to be deep either side of the RSC this year. I know you're off down to Hatton's Grace Day in a couple of weeks' time, on a week on Sunday. I think there could be a match up there with the Tulla Tank, who impressed against Apache Stronghold, and Valsir Lido, who was impressive at Punchestown on Saturday. But I would say the one that stood out most, more than any other on Ireland so far, was the winner Gil Gamboa at Navan. He looked like he relished his fences, and he was nudged along a couple of strides to go after Ruby Walsh up the home straight, and he devoured the last couple of fences and come back on a bridle. I really like the way he done it. I think he's got an entry in the Dream Mode himself, but I'd be keen to keep him at 2 miles for now. I don't think they need to rush to step him back up, even though he did win a 2.5 mile handicap hurdle last year, so we know he's got the stamina. Back onto domestic front, the novice hurdlers, Tara Point, I mentioned briefly before. Of course, I know she only won a small mares race at Exeter, but there's a lot to like about the way she done it. She looks like she's all class to me, and I think there was mention over the weekend that she might be even going for the shallow hurdle next. If that's the case, I wouldn't be surprised if you considered the Grade 2 at Sandown on the first Friday in December before. I know he's used that as a stepping stone in the past for similar types. And another one that won at Exeter earlier in the year, Jolly Allen. He beat a smart horse in King's Tempest, who's won a bumper for Nigel Tristan Davis and has been switched to the Great Rex Yard. Jolly Allen looks like a big raw thing. He's only going to improve with experience. Certainly think he's one of a nice bunch of horses that Harry Fry's got in the novice hurdle division.
Even an injured AP McCoy could get Jolly Allen home at Exeter.
There you go.
Rory, anything so far from the season? Any trends? Well, not trends, but any highlights or any jockeys who impressed or trainers which you've seen to start the ground run? Obviously, we've had Hobbs and Johnson, probably taking advantage of McCoy not being in the limelight as such. Or anyone else?
Yeah, again, we haven't mentioned him here, but Harry Skelton, Dan Skelton, rather, as a trainer. Obviously, Harry going to get himself plenty good as a jockey as well, but he impresses me enormously, not just in how well his horses perform. We've seen a few horses that he's got from other yards winning first time up for him, but he's a very, very interesting trainer to listen to. He's got lots of his ideas of his own, but he's also learned an awful lot both from his father and from Paul Nicholls about how the game should be, how to train horses in the first place. But clearly, he's taken that all on board, and he also has a few ideas of his own, and he's more than happy to talk about that. He's very realistic about his horses as well, and he just comes across as someone who's going to climb the ladder extremely quickly. Wouldn't be at all surprised to see him champion trainer in 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, we had the two from, I don't know if it was actually both from Nigel Twiston Davies, but obviously the one who won the big handicap chase at Ascot, and the one who won it was Doncaster, who just cruised up behind a horse and just sped away. I think it was on Saturday with the Harry Skelton horse. We mentioned about tongue ties earlier about King's Palace. One of the things with Dan Skelton, he just runs all his horses with a tongue tie because it's not going to be a hindrance to the performance unless they've actually shown a disliking for it in training.
Yes, speaking, he gallops into a tongue tie first, and some horses just won't. Most horses will be fine with it. I think it may not make a positive difference, but they'll generally be okay with it. Some horses clearly resent it to some degree, so if they resent it, he doesn't use it. Otherwise, he will use it in all races. And as he says, it's either going to do them good, or it's not going to do them any harm. So it's a bit of a no-brainer. And I don't think too many people think like that. People tend to go for headgear or any kind of aid as a last resort, whereas if it's going to be beneficial, using it early is a better way of going.
I agree. There's a good interview in. Sorry, go on, Paul.
Just going to say, and he might introduce a potential nice sort of haydock on Friday in the shape of Value at Risk that's come over from Ireland, and he's entered in the fixed brush novice hurdle on Friday, so I'll be pretty keen to see him up close. Hopefully he'll be running.
Later on, I'll tweet an interview which he did with Horse and Hound. It was, I think it might be in the owner breeder, but it was very revealing about, like I say, what he says there about his demeanour and his attitude towards racing, and pretty much that he does want to be champion trainer very much sooner rather than later, and it's all about success for him, which I say it's nice to see, and no doubt he will get the success that his hard work deserves. Dave Massey, Paul Ferguson, Rory Delaghy, thank you very much for the first RacingFM weekly wrap. Hopefully it'll be a weekly edition going forward. Next week's obviously the Betfair Chase, where Q-Card, Dinast and Silviano Conti look to fight it out once again. But against Dave, Paul, Rory, thanks a lot for joining us tonight.
No problem.
Thanks.